I'd like to especially welcome our very distinguished guests. And it is absolutely a great honor for me at the World Nuclear Association to host this panel. I'm so excited about it. I'm looking so much forward to the discussions. So what are the fundamental benefits of nuclear energy that should lead decision makers to support both the new build and the existing reactors? How can nuclear projects contribute to recovery from the economic impacts from COVID-19 and generate jobs? What role in the energy mix should nuclear energy have if we are going to have success in moving to clean energy? In this world where we are still in the pandemic, soon coming and already is starting plans for the recovery after the pandemic. And of course, we see that nuclear energy should be part of those plans, those infrastructure investments. How will this be done? We have many things to deal with: the climate change, the recovery, and also to give electricity to more people around the globe. Right now, there are some 50 reactors under construction. There is 108 shovel-ready projects that just need some decision making. And there is also, we need to see that the multiplier effect of jobs and in the economy for nuclear jobs is around 4, sometimes up to 5 and 6, depending on what type of economy. So we'd like to see what role can nuclear play and how can we help the economic growth and the development to go into a clean future, sustainable and resilient future. So I welcome very much the panelists. I will just mention now first the names of everybody, and then I will ask for later on for your remarks. So we have Scott Foster, Director for Sustainable Energy at UNECE. Welcome, Scott. We have Rafael Mariano Grossi, Director General for the International Atomic Energy Agency. Very welcome. We have Mikhail Kudkuka, Minister of Climate, Poland. Very, very welcome. And we have Mr. Jurabek Mirza-Makhmudov, the first Deputy Minister of the Energy of the Republic of Uzbekistan, and also Director General of Uzatom Agency. Very welcome. We have William Magwood, Director General, OECD of Nuclear Energy Agency, NEA, in Paris. And we have Laszlo Varro, Chief Economist, International Energy Agency, and you're also very welcome. So we have a fantastic and great panel, and I will go moving to each one of you to give your introductory remarks. And we also know that you have prepared something, and then later on there will be follow-up and more questions. And I would like to first invite Mr. Rafael Mariano Grossi, Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency. So please give us your remarks.
Now, Agneta, thank you very much again. Thank you very much for giving me this fantastic opportunity to be with you, with the panel, to discuss about, as you were just laying out a minute ago, the role that nuclear energy can play in the current circumstances. I think you yourself, WNA, and other colleagues around this table have been making contributions to this debate for a long time. But there is something which is unique to the circumstances we are all living now. And it, of course, has to do with the fact that for the first time, we are operating under a global pandemic situation, which means, apart from the obvious, evident health considerations that go with it, that we are, together with international financial institutions, looking at the necessary ingredients for economic recovery. And how to make it sustainable. And of course, when we mention things like this, the energy component comes immediately to the fore, and with it, nuclear energy. as part of the global efforts that are necessary and needed to overcome this current situation. So I believe that we need in the nuclear, I would say, community to be able to widen the debate and the scope of our ideas, going beyond the typical argumentation that we have, which of course, and naturally so, points to the positive contribution that nuclear energy makes in terms, for example, of a decarbonized economy in the future, and how to get to it, and to see how we can seamlessly provide our contribution under the current circumstances. I would like to say that during the first stages of the pandemic, the IAEA conducted a worldwide survey of all nuclear power plants, and in close contact with all institutions in all countries operating nuclear installations, and we made a special report to the board of governors of the IAEA, and were able to inform and report that all our installations had been able to operate without a glitch, without a problem, without interruption. This was very important because many feared that due to the extremely stringent, as we know, safety and security requirements that the nuclear industry has, working under lockdown with reduced shifts, with problems of mobility in countries, this could put an additional stress to the nuclear industry, therefore making its viability and its useful contribution under question, or putting it under question. So I'm happy to report that this was not the case, and we were able to continue working as positively as in the past. With regards to what the future brings, I must say that we have continued I would say at two levels from the IAEA, working first and foremost with our member states, and I'm very happy to note the presence in our panel of distinguished representatives of Uzbekistan or Poland, with whom we are working very, very closely in view of their obvious and very welcome interest in nuclear energy. So that is one side, and this has allowed us, even under a pandemic, to get to very, I would say, positive milestones. For example, in the case of the United Arab Emirates, which is one of the success stories in terms of newcomers, this has been brought to a successful end after a long time, and after many years of working together and very closely with them. It's also the case in Belarus a few days ago, and it will be for other countries as well. So this is in terms of what we have been doing with consolidated and newcomers, and the work is of course continuing. We would be able to discuss it further if there is an interest later on during the debate. At the same time, from the IAEA, we have been marking an ever increasing presence in the global debates related to nuclear energy and to climate change. As you all know, my first travel trip abroad as Director General of the IAEA was to the COP25 in Madrid, where my message was very clear in the sense that in global efforts on climate change and a decarbonized world, nuclear has a place at the table. And I am happy also to tell you and to report to you that we have already started working with the British government and Italy, who is of course associated with the effort of the United Kingdom, to bring this message in a very clear way to Glasgow next year for the COP26. So these are some of the ways in which the IAEA is going to be marking an increasingly assertive presence in the global scene. Perhaps by way of introduction, this would be enough, and I would be very glad, Agneta, to elaborate further on more specific aspects of what we are doing as we proceed with the panel. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Rafael. It's really great to hear your comments. It's a very important progress is made, and it's now exactly timing to do these type of activities, even more than ever before, and I will come back to you. It's my great honor to invite also William Magwood, Director General of the OECD Nuclear Energy Agency. Bill, it will be so great to hear your comments. We have seen a lot of important work you have been doing, and there are so many discussions when it comes to climate change and what has to be done. And then sometimes all about the money is forgotten and all about the real contribution to a better environment. It would be good to hear some of your comments. You're very deeply involved in all these.
Thank you very much, Agneta. And it's a great pleasure to share the panel with these distinguished gentlemen up here. And you, of course, and let me take a moment to recognize you for your fantastic tenure as Director General of the World Nuclear Association. You've done a fantastic job. And you've been really our global cheerleader for many years, and it's been greatly appreciated. And so thank you very much for that. Thank you for assembling this discussion today. I think I'd like to start with recognizing that we have a very difficult problem ahead of us. At the OECD, there was an analysis that showed that in order to make the COP21 goals real, in the sense of the electricity infrastructure, that we'd have to see emissions from electricity decrease by 85% in OECD countries by 2050. So anyone who knows anything about the electricity system knows we're talking about an amazing shift in how we do business. And quite frankly, there are many of us that think that the world simply may not be up to the challenge. That it might just be too hard. And so I've watched as many speakers and organizations around the world have started to turn to the philosophy of perhaps that we just have to stop giving up the idea that life can be tomorrow what it has been in the past, that we can't expect to use energy as freely as we once had. So we can't all have a car. So we have to ride bicycles. We can't all fly on airplanes. So we either don't fly or we take a sailboat. And maybe people in developing countries, well, maybe they just simply can't come to the middle class. Maybe that's just not possible if we're going to save the environment. And I can tell you that in my view, if that's a story that we're going to give the public around the world in both OECD countries and in the non-OECD countries and developing countries, then we will fail. There's no way that people are going to give up civilization, give up progress, give up healthcare, give up clean water to save the environment. It will not happen. So it's the responsibility of governments to find the solution that enables the world to progress, for economies to expand, for opportunity to expand in all countries around the world while still protecting the environment. And that's why I think nuclear has a tremendous opportunity. Because in our analysis, when we look at what countries have been doing over the last several years, deploying renewables in pretty significant quantities, but yet not seeing the difference in CO2 emissions very much. And in fact, they've been rising in the last few years. We think that there's going to be an opportunity to reassess what we've been doing. Now, that does not mean that everyone will charge off and start building nuclear power plants. Doesn't mean that. But what it means is that that countries are going to have to start to look at their energy infrastructures more realistically and recognize that it may not be for all countries possible to rely entirely or even in majority on wind and solar to solve the issue. That they may need to have, depending on their infrastructure, something else. Another large dispatchable, which is the most important aspect, dispatchable resource that does not emit CO2. And while hydro is the largest non-emitting source in the world, it is not easy to expand hydro, and many people understand why. In OECD countries, the largest is actually nuclear. And it's a technology that is easily expandable under the right situation, that we understand how to operate, we know how to build, and that we have the ability to use this technology to match with renewables to enable us to be successful. I think the challenge for us all is to recognize that we have had so many problems in nuclear projects over the last few years in OECD countries that the public and many governments are looking at it as perhaps the technology is just too hard to build. But that is because we have not built plants in so many years that in many countries we're just not that good at it anymore. You know, we don't have the supply chain, we don't have the project managers, we don't have the trained regulators who know how to deal with these projects. But in countries where they have been building over time, where they still maintain the supply chains and maintain the expertise and maintain the regulatory capacity, they do quite well. And Mr. Grossi pointed to the UAE as a success story. That's because they relied on a supplier that has an established supply chain and experts who know how to build the plants well. And as a result, they were able to build on cost and on schedule. Now, for countries that don't have that ability, don't have that history of constant build, many of them are beginning to turn towards new technologies, small modular reactors and advanced reactors, with the idea that these technologies can be built the same way we build airplanes today, you know, in factory and then taken to locations to go into operation. This model is yet to be proven. We haven't done it, but there's a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of hope and a lot of governments that think that this may actually be the way to the future. And we at the NEA, we certainly think that this is a very, very strong possibility. And our analysis show that if we don't have nuclear in some form, either large plants or small plants in significant quantities, that the world is very likely to fail quite miserably in its climate objectives. So it's not just a matter of what's good for the nuclear industry, it's really what's good for the world and what's good for society. And I think we all can work to make that happen. So we'll leave it with that and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bill. And also, there will be some more questions for you, so you can further expand. But that's absolutely the very important points you already brought up. And this is a big role for governments, in fact, when we are moving forward. So now I'd like to introduce Mr. Jurabek Mirzamakmudov, First Deputy Minister of the Energy of the Republic of Uzbekistan, and as well Director General of Usatom Agency. And we are very curious to know why Uzbekistan has started to move on nuclear and your plans. And we see you are have very developed plans and good decisions in place. So please, Mr. Jurabek.
Thank you very much, Ms. Agneta Rising. First of all, I would like to thank for this great opportunity to participate in this webinar among such distinguished people. It's a great pleasure for us, and I just want to briefly explain why Uzbekistan decided to go for nuclear, what we are doing, and further, I think I would be able to answer if questions will be there. You're right, Uzbekistan having the fossil fuel, natural gas, crude oil, solar potential. Many people are asking why you decided to go for nuclear. No, when we did the energy balance, and right now actually we're already in the huge deficit for electricity in Uzbekistan because of the growth of economy, population, their capability to buy, and using a lot of new industries are coming. Therefore, when we did the balance and we checked, of course, all the possible resources, we decided that natural gas we could use more for the other purposes as a petrochemical, gas chemical projects. As well as, nevertheless of this, we're planning right now 85% of our power generated by the natural gas. We're planning to double our power generation by natural gas while reducing its consumption by introducing new modern technologies. Also, we're doing the solar, wind projects, mostly on PPP-based projects. However, when we look to 2030, we could see that there will be still huge deficit. That's why, considering that we have a uranium resources, we decided to go for the nuclear. Not only for this, but also, as it was already mentioned by the previous speakers, we consider nuclear as a real sustainable power supply. We consider it as a contribution for the environment protection by reducing CO2 emissions, and of course, as well for the development of other industries, services, goods, manufacturers, and also science and human capital development. Considering that, you know, I just, in 2018, there was made such a decision to start the nuclear program, and Uzatom agency was established, and we gradually started to work on it. But the first thing what we did is, of course, the government, I would like just to mention that the government is fully committed for this nuclear program, and as Mr. Grossi just mentioned, we are working very closely with IAEA on all our aspects, all our programs, we exchanging, sharing information, and we do all planning together with them. The first thing government did was to establish a branch of MEFI University. And not only this, but also we sent students to Moscow, MEFI, and recently we got the first graduates who got the master's degree, and 13 of such students we hired to Uzatom agency and our subsidiaries for our nuclear program. And another thing I just want to take this opportunity to mention is that in September 9, 2019, exactly 1 year ago, was adopted law on nuclear energy for peaceful use in Uzbekistan. So it's a 1 year anniversary today. So we started also working on legal framework, and we would like to thank all our international partners who supported us on reviewing, giving comments and recommendation on that. We're working on improving the working with the regulator. There is established a special government committee under which it will be expanded and working. And at the present time, with the selected our partner Rosatom, we working on draft of EPC, conducting, despite this this pandemic, we're conducting meetings, negotiations via the same way as we're doing today, the webinar by video conferences. And in parallel, on pre-selected site, we are doing engineering survey. And we hope that by the end of this year, if situation will be stabilized and good, we're expecting the inner mission from the IAEA. So, as I already mentioned, despite big natural resources, Uzbekistan, while developing all other sources as well, is committed for nuclear. We consider nuclear as a reliable, cheap power resource, which we can, based on which we can plan our economy as for quite long time. We consider as environmental impact aspect, and also we consider as development for the economy, science, and other areas in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jurovec. It's great and fantastic to see how you're making your plans and also fulfilling them step by step and going forward, and also that your plans are for the sustainability in the future for your country as well. So that was absolutely great to hear. And I now want to see if I haven't got an answer here. I'd like now to move to Mr. Laszlo Varro, Chief Economist of the International Energy Agency, because this is a very important organization for everything that is moving in the whole world when it comes to energy. And of course, economy is one of the most important part for each one of us. So please, Mr. Varro, could you please share your thoughts with us?
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and also thank you very much for the invitation for this very important topic. So, ladies and gentlemen, this year the coronavirus triggered an unprecedented economic and social shock, which, due to the restrictions on mobility and the restrictions on economic activity, had an impact on energy use. And as a result of the deep recession and the social restrictions, we have seen an unprecedented reduction of energy use and an unprecedented reduction of global carbon dioxide emissions by around 2.6 billion tons. But we have been very keen to emphasize that this is not something to be celebrated. This carbon dioxide emission reduction was achieved at an unacceptable social and economic cost. And also, our analysis also shows that unless governments rise to the challenge and put clean energy into the heart of the economic recovery efforts, if the world economy recovers without a significant structural change, it is almost certain that carbon dioxide emissions would rebound, quite possibly to above the 2019 historical peak. So we have a major challenge still ahead. The climate challenge is still completely untouched. In fact, in our sustainable development scenario, which is the mathematical representation of the Paris Agreement, by 2025, just 5 years from now, global carbon dioxide emissions will have to be lower than today. And next time, we will want to achieve that without shutting down the global economy. The electricity sector is at the heart of this transition. Today, electricity is the largest carbon dioxide emission source by far, but electricity is also a sector where we have large, scalable, low carbon alternatives, and the electrification of the economy by electric cars or heat pump heating can become a very powerful tool of decarbonizing other sectors. So essentially, electricity is, it's fair to say, the decisive battlefield of the fight against climate change. In a sustainable development trajectory, the annual average increase of low carbon generation is around the same amount as Japan's electricity consumption. So every year we need to build the equivalent of the Japanese electricity system just from clean energy sources. Now, it is absolutely clear that wind and solar power will play a major role in it. And I think it's very, very important that our discussions about the role and future of nuclear power should loudly acknowledge the technological revolution that has unfolded in wind and solar technology and the unique role that wind and solar technology is likely to play. When at the IEF, we are very much aware of this. And when we argue that there is a clear value in maintaining a diversified low carbon technology portfolio, including nuclear power, that's by no means against wind and solar. In fact, we very much see nuclear power as a very useful complement to a power system which has large shares of renewable energy. But I think we also need to recognize that while we need to ramp up low carbon generation, in the case of nuclear, even a significant loss of existing low carbon generation cannot be ruled out. As a part of the coronavirus crisis, wholesale electricity markets and wholesale gas markets reached record lows. That created major challenges for any facility, including nuclear power plants, which earns revenues from wholesale markets. Very often, the design of those wholesale markets fails to properly remunerate the electricity security contribution of facilities like nuclear power plants. And very often, countries fail to put in place carbon prices which would reflect the low carbon value of nuclear. So this year, we actually estimate that the nuclear power production, which will be lost from nuclear power plants that shut down before the end of their optimal technical lifetime, is around half of the newly installed wind and solar power globally. So this year, every single year, around every second wind turbine and every second solar panel is just simply replacing one type of low carbon generation with another type of low carbon generation without contributing to decarbonization at all. I think we can do much better than that. So we have been advising governments that the first priority should be that for any nuclear power plant which satisfies the safety and operational regulations, it should be extended and should operate until the optimal lifetime. We also think that there's a clear need for reinvesting into nuclear capacity. In fact, from a macroeconomic point of view, perhaps the most important impact of the coronavirus crisis, that instead of the gradual normalization of monetary conditions and a gradual rise of interest rates, major central banks around the world reacted by a massive monetary stimulus leading to zero or even negative interest rates. Now that is very important from the point of view of nuclear power, because as you know, for nuclear power, perhaps the most significant obstacle is the very large initial capital investment. This obstacle is much easier to tackle in a zero or negative interest rate environment. That is an opportunity that governments can take advantage of it. And last but not least, I think it's fair to say that there is a limited private sector investment appetite for the third generation $10 billion, 10 years construction time projects. Those are essentially became the preserve of state-owned energy companies. But we do see private sector investment appetite into venture capital and research and development into advanced nuclear technologies. But there again, governments have a very important role to play, both in promoting basic science and also to facilitating and helping early deployment. Our analysis clearly shows that nuclear power has an important role and makes the energy transition more cost-effective and more energy secure. But we also shouldn't be blind, and we should recognize that there are major challenges to be overcome both by the industry and also by governments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Varo. That was very, very good to hear your remarks and your clear statements on what has to be done and also the challenges. So thank you very much. I will come back to you later. I'd like to now introduce Mr. Michal Kudkuka, and he's Minister of Climate in Poland, and he has, of course, lots to tell also as a background as chairman of the previous COP conference, and also new announcements on plans in Poland for the future. So, Mr. Kudkuka, please.
Thank you very much, and welcome to everybody. I'm very happy to be part of this conversation, and thank you very much for introducing me through my COP24 presidency cap, as it was for me an extremely important moment in my life, but I think also it was an important moment in the life of international community, as it was probably one of the last such a successful consensus-built international agreement. And then we set up basis for the replacement of Kyoto Protocol by Katowice rulebook, implementing Paris Agreement starting from the next year and opening doors also year's plans in the framework of Paris Agreement. So I'm very happy for that. But since then, since Katowice, December 2018, we are right now facing more and more challenges, and it's increasingly important that we tackle this challenge by not omitting such an important source of clean, stable, and scalable energy as nuclear. And so when we are seeing the evolution of Polish energy system, we are facing right now unprecedented growth of renewable technologies. So we have been recognized by Bloomberg as Europe's hottest green market in the coming years. Since 2019 to 2024, IEA, and I welcome Leszlo Varo, forecasted that in Poland we will be having 65% growth in installed capacity in renewables. And so that's already a good news, and that is building a zero emission system, which within 20 years we expect to be of the size of the existing conventional system that we have right now. But it will not happen without nuclear. Why? We know that we are faced with intermittence of renewable sources. When we have analyzed, for the sake of our energy strategy, previous climate years, we have seen that there are periods lasting up to 9-10 days each year when we have do not have enough sun, do not have enough wind, whether onshore or offshore, to provide our system with enough electricity. And so we must tackle this challenge of these important gaps, which are making that our renewable sources cannot fill the gap and cannot provide us electricity. And this will be increasingly important for a country like Poland. Poland is one of the two only OECD countries since 1990 with uninterrupted growth. Of course, we are right now are facing COVID-19. That's a different story. But we are facing a very big increase in the quality of life in Poland. And we foresee that next 20 years will be also very much successful for Poland if we tackle this right. And I think that providing a stable, competitive energy for our industry is part of this making things right equation. So we have just published a draft of Polish energy policy as well as Polish nuclear program. To be adopted by our Council of Ministers. We as Ministry of Climate, we are the host of these two documents, and we expect that within next 20 years, we will be building a whole nuclear fleet of reactors here in Poland. We expect the first reactor to be standing by 2033, and then every 2, maybe 3 years, but we expect it to be 2 years, a new reactor will be built so that the fleet by the beginning of 2040s will reach 6 nuclear reactors which will provide baseload electricity for Polish industry and for Polish society. We expect that all plans announced by Ministry of Climate will contribute to up to 300,000 new jobs, and out of them we expect 60,000 to be the jobs directly linked with nuclear. But when we are speaking about electricity, and Laszlo Varro briefly also elaborated on that, we see that electricity will be playing an increasingly important role in the energy transition in the 21st century. IEA, if I recall correctly, stipulates that the share of electricity in the final energy consumption will rise from 19 till 24% by 2040. And in a country like Poland, this will be even higher as we will be facing sector coupling. We see already a rapid development of electric buses here in Poland. We are the biggest exporter and producer within EU of electric buses. We expect also by the plans which have been developed by Ministry of Climate that starting from 2025 in all major cities of Poland, having more than 100,000 inhabitants, and we have 44 such cities, it will not be possible anymore to sell combustion engines buses. We will switch to zero-emission buses, whether battery or hydrogen. And it's one of yet another source of consumption of electricity. We have an enormous challenge with heating system here in Poland. Since last 18 months, we have thermo-modernized more than 200,000 houses here in Poland. And an important element of this transition is replacing old fossil fuel non-ecological boilers with heat pumps. And we expect the trio PV heat pump and electric charger to be also the winning trio within our housing system. But this is housing, this is individual houses, but again, industry needs a stable baseload zero-emission energy. So when we are facing this energy transition here in Poland, we are facing it in a extremely comprehensive manner, taking all into account, but also building a level playing field for all technologies. And it will be extremely important, as we know that some of the technologies in the beginning are more costly or more complicated to be put in place than others. And we know about it. We are also building a support scheme for our wind offshore here in Poland. But we need also to recall that nuclear requires specific, well-designed regulatory framework, and a framework which will also benefit with available financing, as the cost of financing is in fact absolutely crucial for building competitive nuclear. We, of course, see also benefits and opportunities with new sectors. So we have engaged together with our Japanese colleagues from JEEA on a research reactor, HTGR, high temperature gas cooled reactor, as we see this technology to be extremely promising, and we would like this research reactor to be built here in Poland in international cooperation. And we see a high temperature reactor also as part of the solution to the hydrogen production. We see that the production of zero emission hydrogen can be also done with nuclear. And we see that hydrogen economy, that hydrogen can play an important role in the coming years, especially here in European Union. And we are working also hand in hand with other European countries as well as with the European Commission here in Poland also to build a nuclear, a hydrogen sector deal together with our industries and partners. So all in all, Polish perspective is a perspective of unprecedented transition that we are facing, and we are ready to engage in this. And I'm very happy that we can share our plans and our challenges together with international community, and especially it's important that we recognize nuclear as part of the solution, especially after what IPCC panel has demonstrated for COP24. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kudkuka. It was absolutely clear and very important to hear all about the development and your plans and how much you're basing this on, which we always love, of course, science and facts. And that's very important to have a good long-term plan and to be able to reach all those goals. And we see all the challenges, but that seems to be very much on a good track now. That's very nice to hear. Thank you very much. I'd like to move to Scott Foster, and Director of Sustainable Energy for UNECE. And we are so happy now to invite you and hear about your comments.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you today. And I'd like to thank you for inviting me to join the discussions. It's a bit challenging to follow such a group of speakers because they've pretty much covered most of the issues and the topics and the themes, but there you go. I'm Director of Sustainable Energy, and that concept itself is a challenging one because there isn't actually agreement on what we mean by sustainable. And so on the one hand, you've got everyone who's convinced it's only about climate change. And they're very focused on energy efficiency and renewables in particular, and that is the push. You've got pretty much the rest of the world that is actually worried about putting food on the table, a roof over their head, educating their children. They might be concerned about climate change, but it's not at the same position in their hierarchy of needs. So the challenge that we face is finding an integrated solution that can deliver on climate and deliver on development in a coherent way. Now, our approach at UNECE and our view is that all technologies have a role to play. So we are talking about fossil in the future. 80% of today's energy mix is fossil. Even in a scenario that meets a 2-degree objective, fossil will still have over 50% of the share. So we've got to have a high efficiency, low emissions technology. We've got to have carbon capture and storage, of course, renewables, of course, energy efficiency at the core, and nuclear power. If you will, the whole host of technologies has got to play its role. Now, right now, the analysis that we've done shows that we're on a track towards between 4 and 6 degrees. And it is absolutely an imperative that we switch. And as Laszlo has already said, the pandemic has given us an opportunity to make that pivot. And that's something that's quite important. We're not going to get to 2 degrees in our energy mix of the future if nuclear power is excluded. So that's an important consideration, is if we're trying to get to 2 degrees, all of these are part of that energy mix. Now, an important consideration is that every country has got its own legacy, its own heritage of natural resources, its background in terms of cultural, legislative, regulatory. So there's not one pathway that's going to dictate for everybody. Everybody's going to make their choices, and we've already been hearing that today. There are some common themes that emerge, at least they should emerge. We would expect that countries will be working to improve the quality of life of their citizens. We've just heard that in the case of Poland. We would expect that countries will be rational. They'll be rational economically, they'll be rational socially, they'll be rational environmentally. And these really ought to be principles that shape the choices that they take. Now, in our view, there needs to be a price on carbon, and that's absolutely essential. It forms a business model foundation for things like CCS as well as like nuclear power. Whether that's going to be a tax or some kind of a market mechanism, today implicitly with all of the different structures and mechanisms we've put in place, there is an implicit price for carbon, but it's not a consistent approach, and I think that could be sorted out. The other thing that we should be able to depend on is mutually beneficial economic interdependence. We should be building up the trading rules. We should be sharing our capacity. We should be sharing our know-how rather than putting up barriers and walls. And if we can get a collaborative going across market rules, across standards and norms, achieving the 2030 agenda would be much simpler. And as all of the speakers have noted, if we want to do nuclear power properly, it's got to address a number of the challenges that it faces. So I'm not going to go on much longer than that other than to reinforce what the other speakers have already said. To me, it is obvious that yes, we can meet the challenges. The technology is there, the know-how is there. We are our own worst enemy. Not only yes, we can, but yes, we have to, because the alternative is unacceptable. We are talking about a species existential threat, and it's time to make the pivot and have a build back better approach. So I will end on an optimistic note and say, I believe that yes, we will. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Foster. That's really good to hear this perspective of all the needs and how we can rationalize and look to a possible solution and cooperate. That's what we all need to do. So thank you very much. I'd like now to move to some more shorter questions to all of the panelists. And I'd like to start with Mr. Magwood. And in your view, what is that nuclear energy brings and delivers that cannot be matched by other low carbon technology? Is there some specific benefits? Why is nuclear essential and to the global response of climate change? So, Mr. Magwood?
Well, I think in some degree, it's a process of elimination. There's simply not another energy technology before us today that can do the things nuclear can do. Nuclear can provide very large amounts of carbon-free electricity on a dispatchable basis. And we just don't have another technology that can do that today. Maybe we'll have fusion 50 or whatever years from now, maybe carbon sequestration. I think Mr. Foster kind of alluded to carbon sequestration. Maybe that will work out and we'll be able to use that to help get us to where we need to go. But today we don't have those options. What will happen 30 or 40 or 50 years from now, who knows? It's hard to predict the future, but today, right now, it's hard to see how we get there without nuclear. And nuclear does what it does extremely well. And that's probably the most important aspect of it. One thing I would also say is that the benefits of building nuclear facilities actually goes well beyond the fact it's carbon free. Obviously, that's the focus of the conversation. But, and I know Mr. Kudkuka, he and I have talked about this, it's an amazing device to spur economic development, technological growth, education of young people. You heard the minister from Uzbekistan talk about the people that are starting to become educated, the people getting their degrees at MEFI. to learn how to be nuclear engineers. This is how you move societies forward. And nuclear just does this extremely well. It's done it very well for 60 years, and it continues to do it well. And as I visited countries and talked to ministers around the world in countries like Middle Eastern countries and African countries, they are fully cognizant of that aspect of nuclear as economic development, as social development, and that's one of the things about it that excites them. But for many of us at the table today, it's the fact that it's a clean, dispatchable source of electricity that we can rely on right now.
Thank you very much. I'd like now to turn to Mr. Grossi. And you have spoken about nuclear energy and adding stability and also to the electricity supplies and in the mix. But what more benefits can nuclear energy and nuclear generation offer beyond the low carbon part?
Well, thank you, Agneta. I think some of these ideas have been mentioned to a certain extent by other panelists. But let me add, what we are trying to do from the IAEA is look at the very concrete, the very tangible. Since we work directly with countries and we help them to the extent possible and guide them in their steps, we look into this added value that we can have. And I can say that when we see, as one of the panelists was saying, that I think it was Mr. Foster, that we need all. Yeah, we need all, and we have to see how best to combine, how best to have a grid that is stable as much as it is flexible. When we see that countries are, and rightly so, and we welcome that, increasingly turning to solar or wind to generate low carbon electricity, we all know that this has to be done in combination with other sources, including nuclear, that provide for a more stable source, ensuring 24/7 supply of low carbon electricity, which limits the risks of blackouts and other disruptions, and by the way, gives countries more confidence to get into the realm of renewables. From a purely economic point of view, and for those countries that have fleets, and in some cases aging fleets of nuclear power plants, there is also an interesting phenomenon that we are looking at in terms of the long-term operation. Investment in long-term operation is essential. Also, is a very interesting economical way for countries that are confirmed users to continue doing that and to continue bridging the gap until either renewables, other sources, or new nuclear, because in some cases, of course, there will be fleet replacement, which is so important. So not only working on the challenges of long-term operation, but investing also in new build for the longer term will be made ever more sustainable and possible. It is also another aspect that we should take into consideration is that the always important idea of the domestic factor, integrating more and more the national industry in the projects. As countries, for example, like in our distinguished panel, like Poland, like Uzbekistan, with important industrial technological infrastructure are concerned, it is clear that there will be an economic spillover that it will be very tangible and everybody will be able to see. So for nuclear, as I was saying in the beginning, it's not only about our clean energy contribution, is about sustainability, is about bringing a grid that is stable, and it's also about, which is very important, is providing this economic factor, internal boost that is so needed and required. But all of this can only be done when accompanied by the necessary normative guidance, which the IAEA is providing for all countries, be it newcomers or consolidated users.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grossi. Thank you very much for this expanding of these remarks. Very important. I'd like to move to Mr. Barrow. And, we were talking about the electricity, and you said also that that's a decisive battlefield. And in the global recovery from the 2008-9 economic crisis, that recovery was not green. And all greenhouse gas emissions was rising in the years after. What is it that we should do in order to have a better, not do these mistakes? What should governments do to ensure that we are not getting into this situation again?
So it is absolutely true that if you look at the historical data series of global carbon dioxide emissions, the 2008-2009 financial crisis is actually just a hardly visible blip on an increasing emission pattern. 2010 was one of the biggest increases in global carbon dioxide emissions in history. And the overall recovery from the financial crisis was quite energy intensive. Having said that, governments around the world, including in Europe, the United States, Korea, Japan, China, implemented green stimulus programs after the financial crisis. And those green stimulus programs did achieve important things. There are some important lessons from those green stimulus efforts. First of all, don't reinvent the wheel. The experience suggests that scaling up existing policies and channeling investment into scalable technologies is a very effective way of achieving a green stimulus. Another important lesson is to address the financing barriers. Those financing barriers might appear at the municipality side with energy efficiency, but they might also appear in the case of the corporate sector. In the context of nuclear, the large majority of nuclear power plants in the world are operated by electric utilities, and a lot of those electric utilities are currently facing a strained financial situation because of a combination of weak electricity demand and very low electricity prices. We also think that the lessons from 2008-2009 green stimulus efforts suggest that governments need to pay attention to industrial value chains. A lot of governments put efforts into building up the solar industry, but then there were a series of solar panel manufacturers going bankrupt, creating some significant difficulties. Again, that I see here as a major difference is that the nuclear power plants have an important operational employment footprint, and also for new nuclear power plants, a very substantial part of the economic activity is construction-related activity which cannot be outsourced. For example, in the United Kingdom right now, the Hinkley Point construction project is one of the biggest employers of working-class people. It has a very significant local employment impact. And last but not least, we also think that governments have to take a broad view and consider the impact of of energy policy on broader social objectives, on inequality, on the impact on minority groups and disadvantaged groups of society. I think it's fair to say that during the 2008 recovery, there was no sufficient attention to this. So we have some important lessons. We also have a much more mature technological package. Some of the important technologies, primarily wind, solar, some of the electricity storage technologies became much more mature and much more scalable than they were 10 years ago. We also see a very important change in the attitudes of the corporate sector and the attitudes of the finance sector. So large corporations, primarily this is still Europe and the United States, not yet regions like developing Asia, but large European and large American corporations pay an increasing attention to their carbon footprint. Companies like consumer good companies like IKEA or Nike became major investors into clean energy. Big IT companies became major investors in clean energy. So far, there has been a limited impact on this, although some of the big IT companies are investing in nuclear technologies, so there is a spillover there as well. And the finance sector is much more important. So we generally think that it is too early to celebrate. We have been outspoken in calling for a grand coalition of governments, finance sector stakeholders, corporations, and other social groups to promote emission reductions. But we're seeing that with such a grand coalition, there is now a chance to turn 2019 as an all-time peak of historical carbon dioxide emissions. This can be done by simultaneously promoting the recovery of the global economy, but it is by no means automatic. It will require a coordinated effort.
Thank you very much. Again, a lot of good advice and learnings and lots of things as well we need to work on, and I think that's very good to hear from your position how this looks from your side. And I thank you very much. And I'd like to move now to Mr. Jurabek. And you had a lot of considerations and criteria for how you would make your plan for nuclear, and also how you were reasoning on your system and what kind of models you needed for your system. Can you please let us know a little bit about this, please?
Well, thank you very much, Agneta. Indeed, you know, when Uzbekistan made the decision to go for nuclear, it wasn't that we, of course, we are a newcomer in the nuclear power station. However, nuclear science was for quite a long time in Uzbekistan. We had this scientific research reactor operating for quite a long time, uranium production. So, of course, when we decided to go, how to do, what to do, definitely we studied experience of all nuclear powers, how they did, what they achieved, what they're getting, and what they can offer. And based on that and the availability of technologies, especially we paid attention to the security, safety of the nuclear power plant. And based on this, at the time in 2018, when Uzbekistan was to decide how and what to do, 3+ power generation, nuclear power plant was available with our technology from Russia. Yes, right now the 3+ generation by Framatome is in operation in China as well, but this was one of the key decisions for Uzbekistan to make a decision to select the Russian technology, Russian VVR reactor 1200, which, and as a reference, we decided to go for Novovoronezh nuclear power plant and Novovoronezh 2, which is already in operation and passed all required tests and inspections, including from Europe. This one was one of the key criteria. Of course, there are some other criteria as the language. The people of Uzbekistan, most of the people speaking Russian and easily understanding these technical requirements, which is also very important for the safe operation of the plant. These were one as a key factors. Another important factor, of course, was that Russia is offering soft loan for financing of the project. And this is also was one of the key aspects in the complex when we made the decision. And at the end, I would say that, you know, the time, for example, in order to go for other companies or for other countries, it would require a much longer period to get approval for intergovernmental agreements. Whereas with Russia, we finished in 6 months. And now we are on the final stage of EPC contract, but it doesn't mean that we only select Russia. We have visited many other European countries, Japan, Korea, France especially, and we're discussing with them so that to use the best available technologies, other facilities available for the nuclear power plant from around the world. So maybe it will be a kind of a mix as well, outside of the nuclear island. That's why we hope, and also we brought international advisors as technical as well as the financial and legal. We're working with them. For example, our technical advisors were from Czech Republic. and financial legal advisors are from USA. So in this aspect, we believe that the nuclear world is very close, very community is very supportive to each other, and therefore we believe during the implementation of the projects, we will approach even more to our partners, to you, to Mr. Grossi for support of our ambitious plans. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Jurabek. It was interesting to hear, and now I'd like to move over to Mr. Kudkuka. And you, as Poland is part of the European community, you have a membership in the European Union. And in this context, you know, also some of the member states in Europe, they have a very aggressive policy of opposing nuclear energy and pushing that inside the EU policy. So including like the EU Green Deal. So what challenge does this present to Poland, and what can Poland do to counter this opposition?
Thank you very much. Well, for Poland, this is an unprecedented challenge, as the starting point for our economy is very different than the ones for many of our colleagues in other European countries. Poland was the only country between 1989 when in the vicinity of Central European countries where we didn't develop nuclear. You had nuclear power plants, and we have still them in previous Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia, now Czech Republic and Slovakia, in Ukraine, in Lithuania, in Central European countries such as Romania or Hungary, not speaking about our friends and colleagues in France, where 75% of the energy mix was and still is provided by nuclear energy. In Poland, this was a completely different story, and we are beginning this journey to climate neutrality with 75% share of coal in our energy mix. And recognizing this starting point is an important element of the discussion within the European Union. And we have assisted in the European Union Council in December last year, when all European countries, including Great Britain at that time, agreed that Europe will move to 2050 climate neutrality target, but all 27 other member states also recognized in a unanimous decision that Poland has a different starting point, and those must follow a dedicated separate path. So this difficulty has been also reflected in the discussion about just transition. So money which is dedicated to help regions which are dependent on fossil fuels. And when we are speaking about nuclear energy, we see it as the future baseload provider for Polish energy system, and the shift from existing conventional power to a shift which is based on nuclear in terms of baseload is an unprecedented challenge, and we have given ourselves 20 years to achieve it. It's not that much, but we think that we can make it. But we will, of course, be happy to collaborate with our friends and colleagues from all European Union countries, as well as from others. We are discussing with Japanese colleagues on research reactor, as I said, HTGR, and we are discussing also with others, like American colleagues, regarding how the cooperation around nuclear could be long-lasting and could solve all challenges we are facing. It's a technological challenge. We know that there is a big competency gap in many European countries. They ended the construction of nuclear power plants already years ago, and or we need enough well-skilled engineers, but also good specialists in terms of know-how for companies, how to organize such a big build. But we are working on that in the international context, and we are confident that it can be done. So that would be regarding your question, Agneta.
Thank you very much. And of course, it's good for us to see that you are having a track forward, and it will also help other countries in Europe because you have a good understanding for how you're moving forward, and that is needed for some other countries as well. So we are not getting Europe in some kind of limbo when it comes to developing nuclear, especially when it comes to financing. And this is important for us. And we will have another panel on that later on. So I'd like to invite also Mr. Foster to talk, give a remark, because you have talked about governments having an allergic reaction when talking about policies towards nuclear. But also, I would say that today's energy system will have to deal with the resilience, because crises give this impact on systems, and we need to have the system resilient. And what is then the role that you see that nuclear will take in a such more resilient energy future?
Thank you. That's actually a pretty loaded set of questions, but I'll give it a shot. I think I'd like to start by recognizing that what we're doing isn't working, and we are getting it desperately wrong. I just mentioned that we're on a track towards between 4 and 6 degrees. We're going to see another pandemic at some point in the future. We're seeing the forest fires in California. We're seeing the rising oceans. So clearly the formula that we're using to address climate change and the formula that we're using to address resilience, it's the wrong formula. So when I hear many players, when they're talking about fossil, say leave it in the ground. And when I hear others say no nuclear because it's just such a horrible technology, I just step back and say, how is that a rational way to think about the choices that we've got? Let me start on the nuclear side. I would say that there's a desperate failure in communications from the nuclear side. And at some point that becomes a defensive mechanism. But just looking at naming conventions for power plants, and I'll use some American examples, Diablo Canyon, Marblehead, Turkey Point, those aren't images that really convey a positive image for the industry. Then you have things like 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl and Fukushima, and those dominate how you address and think about nuclear power because you're trying to deal with a public impression. And in fact, what's required is dealing with the human and institutional factors that exacerbated those problems. It involves changing the financing obligations, and this has been discussed by other panelists, with the small modular reactors so that the financial capital exposure is minimized, making sure that you are meeting the capital cost requirements and the capital risk appetite that financial players have. So there's a whole set of solutions that are out there that would bring nuclear power onto the table in terms of affordability and reliability and image that is completely blocked by this allergic reaction, as if you say the word nuclear, I'm going to have an emotional meltdown. That doesn't work. The same thing is true on the fossil side, where you're saying leave it in the ground. You're completely ignoring all of the development challenges and all the transitional challenges that countries face, whether you're talking about oil or coal or something else. And the idea, and this applies to both industries, is using the capital, using the technology know-how of the industry as part of the solution, instead of pointing the finger and say, you're bad people, stop that. They're part of the answer, and we've got to find a way to bring them in. I shouldn't pick on the gas industry because they're not on the call, but I'll use them. They come out and say, well, we're great because we're not coal. I'm sorry, that's not the approach that we need to be taking. So I'd like to refer back to some comments that were made. We've got to have enduring policy frameworks, enduring policy choices. Putting in a gazillion subsidies for renewables and then withdrawing, creating an industry and then letting it collapse is not a way to create an enduring solution set going forward. So energy is at the heart of the future, and it is the answer to sustainable economic development going forward. It does involve the all technologies approach. My own view is that we need to reinvent energy as a service industry rather than the commodity industry it's always been. We also have to deal with the global supply chain of all of these industries and their interconnections with the neighbors. So we're talking about housing, we're talking about health, we're talking about transportation. And when governments can sit back and take an integrative policy approach and deliver solutions that are rational economically, rationally socially, and rational environmentally, then I think we start to answer the problem. But as long as we let an allergy dictate our thinking, we will not develop the kind of resilient system. Nuclear power is part of the energy mix going forward. It does provide reliable, low carbon, always available energy solutions, and you can't just exclude it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for those comments. I now like to go into your final comments. We are soon coming into, or we're already into some type of overtime. And of course, we would like to keep to schedule as much as possible. But also with this distinguished panel, I would like you to give a 1 minute final remark. And so I will invite to Mr. Jorabek. Would you like to give us your final remark, please?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank you, Ms. Agneta Rezing, and all organizers for such a great event. And we in Uzbekistan are committed, although we're developing all, as I told you, we're doing in renewable, solar, wind, a lot of projects, doing in gas-fired projects. However, we believe that nuclear is definitely should be in the future and should be one of our energy mix. That's why we believe for its, we fully understand its benefits, which we all discussed, everybody mentioned. Of course, it depends how the countries will approach, how we will implement, but as a newcomer, I would like to assure that we are fully committed to meet all international requirements in this regard. We're fully committed, we will follow as our, I would say, you know, we have a kind of word saying teachers, right? So teachers or experienced people will show us the right guideline. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jorabek. I will now try Mr. Kudkuka again.
Yes, can you hear me right now?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Briefly, 3 issues. If we want to reach our climate goals, then such an important zero-emission source, which is already providing half of the zero-emission energy within European Union, is necessary. Thus, we must maintain the existing share and develop nuclear in this regard. Second, regarding our COVID recovery, we see also that nuclear can be bringing good jobs, and we see that it has also a regional impact. For every one place, one job in a nuclear power plant, we have 2 jobs in the surrounding region. So it's also part of the COVID recovery plan, and especially it should be then dedicated to regions which will be coping with consequences of pandemic slowdown. And then last but not least, we need to tackle it on the regulatory basis, putting all technologies in the level playing field so that they can develop, they can compete, and that we can have also a market-based sound economic system.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kudkuka. And now I'd like to go to Mr. Magwood. Do you have some short closing remarks for us, please?
Yes, and thank you, Agneta, for assembling this panel. It's been a fantastic conversation. I think really your comments from all the speakers were very much on point, and I appreciated listening to them. I would simply say that it's going to be very important for governments to take this challenge seriously. I have found that in many conversations around the world, there's different levels of politics or ideology that have come into the conversation that have really prevented us from solving this tremendous challenge. And we're not going to solve it through rhetoric. We're only going to solve it through tangible, realistic action. And I will point to Poland as a very good example of what governments can do when they just look soberly at a problem without prejudging the outcome, and just simply say, here are our options and here's what we can do. And I think Poland did that, and I think there's other governments that do that as well, but not enough, I'm afraid, to really get us there. If we simply try to solve the problem in the most efficient way, I think you will see that there is a role for nuclear. It is not the only solution; it's a part of the solution. But in particular, and in our analysis, particularly when you look at nuclear or look at energy, not just 24/7, but over 365 days, it's extraordinarily difficult to see how we can progress and have sustained, reliable, cost-effective infrastructure for electricity generation without nuclear, while decarbonizing as dramatically as we're aiming to do. So that's the challenge ahead, and the challenge is mostly with us as decision makers.
Thank you very much for those very important words. I'd like to move to Mr. Foster. Do you have some short closing remark from your side?
Yes, I'd like to simply follow on some of my previous remarks. If the world of energy is moving, particularly in the area of electricity, to a blend of the traditional plus a distributed generation model, clearly there will be a role for the different technologies that nuclear represents, but it does involve addressing costs, ensuring reliability, addressing the safety issues, and they've got to get the messaging right. That's critical. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Foster. I'd like to move to Mr. Varro. Do you have some final comments you'd like to give us?
Thank you very much. At the IEA, we passionately believe on the need for energy policy to be based on solid science. Now, science is absolutely clear on the risk of greenhouse gas emissions and climate change, but science is also absolutely clear that no carbon dioxide is generated in a nuclear reactor. Anybody who doesn't know that would fail an undergraduate physics exam. And still, in the political and media discourse, very often nuclear is treated as if it was an inferior low-carbon resource compared to other low-carbon resources that should be somehow discriminated against. Now, it is possible, in our view, to reach climate targets without nuclear power. And countries can exercise their sovereign right to refrain from using nuclear power. That's a sovereign right that a country can have. But the analysis and the experience also shows that this creates non-trivial additional difficulties in reaching climate targets. And unfortunately, the energy transition that we face is extremely challenging. In fact, we are badly off track. We are running out of time, and we are running out of a carbon budget. So we think that while certain countries had a sovereign right and refrained from using this technology, the majority of global energy use and the majority of global carbon dioxide emissions are actually taking place in countries which did not rule out nuclear as an option. And I think in those countries, we definitely need nuclear to be a ground coalition.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Varro. I'd like to go to Mr. Grossi. I will give you the last word in this very distinguished panel. So please give us your final comment.
What an honor and what a responsibility, Agneta. Thank you very much. We've learned a lot today from all participants. Let me say from our perspective, all of these considerations, the planning, the visions, what we know that must be done or avoided when it comes to nuclear is simply not possible without a solid, strong, normative and technical underpinning. And this is what the IAEA has been doing, is doing, and will continue to be doing. This is what we did with the Arab Emirates, with Belarus, what we are going to be doing with Uzbekistan, with Poland, and with the rest that are embarking on this magnificent work in nuclear. We need to ensure and to give guarantees to the international community about the safe, secure, and non-proliferation character of our industry. And when the attention of the international community moves on to the next project, when the lights go off, the IAEA stays and is always there for nuclear industry. So we will continue this commitment. And as I said, an honor to be with all of you today, Agneta. Thank you very much. And let me extend an invitation to all of you for our scientific forum that will take place at the time of the General Conference of the IAEA, when we will be discussing precisely nuclear power and clean energy transition with Fatih Birol, representatives of industry and other people, to continue this dialogue that, of course, must continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grossi, and it will be an honor. I will be in the scientific forum also as a speaker, so that will be fantastic. And I now say this was absolutely an exciting event for me, a very new experience to have all of you distinguished leaders in the world on this screen in my home, and looking to all these words. And it is not only here, it's going all around the world. We have had lots of viewers, and we also continue tomorrow with other panels. But first of all, thank you very much. It has been the best ever panel I've been to, because of your remarks have been so encouraging and so important. And I hope everybody also have seen this. Thank you very much.